My ideal thing is I'd want to play him about 38 minutes. I really would. In a playoff situation, that as the head coach, like that's my ideal number. In the regular season, you bring him along, and so I think 30 was the number this year that he ended up. But possibly, John, and I feel like Joel is completely, this is good. Joel is completely aware that kind of as he goes with his health and his fitness, we go.
That was Brett Brown on Friday's Zoom media call. Josh Hennig here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to more of your text messages coming up at 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. But joining us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, you can follow him on Twitter at Scout with Bryan Oringher, 7 years in the NBA, video coordinator, advanced scout. He now has the Patreon Scout with Bryan. You have an opportunity to get all kinds of inside information and great content there from him, from somebody who knows the ins and outs of the league. And as all guests, he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Bryan, how you doing on this Monday?
I'm good, Josh. How are you?
Doing pretty good, all things considered. So, one of the reasons I wanted to have you come on is because you do a lot of, video, you do a lot of analysis when it comes to all the teams in the league. And, one of the things that we've been talking about with the Sixers is because of Brett Brown's comments on Friday about saying, hey, as Joel's fitness goes, we go, do we sometimes undervalue or underplay the importance of a star like Joel Embiid to the success of a team?
Sure. I mean, I think he's obviously one of the best, if not the best, pure five men in the league. And, him and Ben together, I think is, can always be one of the best duos in the NBA. And, they've had phenomenal success together, at least in the regular season, when healthy. Obviously last year, a crazy Kawhi bounce away from, making a really incredible run. Health is unbelievably important. And, I think people forget, you look at it and see them in the 6th seed, and that can be a little depressing sometimes. But, they've got 39 wins. Miami's got 41 in the 4. Boston's got 43 in the 3. So, there's a lot of parity. There's a lot of pretty even teams, in my opinion. And I think Philly's, kind of right there in that mix if hopefully things do get started again.
Where do you think Joel Embiid is in his development evolution of the basketball player? Because we know he's only been playing organized basketball since his mid-teens, and he missed the first 2 years in the NBA because of his foot injury situation. He hasn't played a full 70-plus games of the season. So, where do you evaluate his development as a basketball player?
I think he's, close to his peak. I think he's, obviously a pretty old school, got so many different post moves and dream shake type things. And, it's just such a force down there and has that kind of impact potentially, generally on defense as well. I think the one area I'd like to see him really continue to grow, though, is in terms of his jumpers, his 3 in particular. I think that's something that's really, really important for him because, truthfully, I don't think Ben Simmons is ever going to really develop a reliable shot, especially from 3. If he does, I think we're still years and years potentially away from that. I think Joel is much closer to that and, has shown a decent 3 ball at times. But I think he has to continue to shoot them with confidence and to take them because that's what makes the defense, be honest on Simmons' drives and the impact he has getting to the rim and getting downhill. When Joel's able to create that space for him by playing outside, I think that's when, they're really at their best, playing with Simmons kind of in a Giannis type role with shooters, spaced around him.
You mentioned about, Ben Simmons and his shooting. One of the things with Giannis, though, is that he actually does attempt shots on the outside where Ben has not. How much do you think Ben's game at times maybe limits the Sixers overall because he's not a guy who is as, for lack of a better term, diversified in his offensive skill set as Embiid?
Yeah, you could make that argument, and there might be some validity to it, but, how much does Giannis's jump shot, really change how he's being played? Truthfully, teams are still daring him, all season long to take wide open threes. Teams are clapping on the bench when he's taking those shots. So yes, I mean, Giannis, has certainly gotten better at them and is taking them, and he deserves praise for having the courage to shoot them, and maybe it'll become better and better as he continues to grow. But for the most part, I think he's still like a 30%, low 30s 3-point shooter, and teams are definitely living with that shot, as great as he is getting to the basket. So, my view's always been that that really hasn't opened up a whole lot more for Giannis. He just kind of, shoots them sometimes because I think he realizes, like in the playoffs, him as a superstar type role is really going to need that shot. Ben's jump shot is just so mechanically, far away from being anything decent. And, I said that all off season, even as people were getting themselves all worked up over these, 2-minute highlight compilations from pickup games, that, his shot's still years away. And honestly, I think it's more important for him just to be able to make like a 15, 16-footer off the dribble occasionally to keep defenses honest, maybe on pick and rolls, to stop going under on everything with him. I think that's almost a bigger shot for him and much more likely to be anytime soon, than really having a three ball that he attempts with any consistency.
Bryan Oringher joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Scout with Bryan. That's Bryan, Bryan, not Brian. Bryan Oringher was working in the NBA for 7 years with the Wizards, Hawks, and Raptors. Bryan, what is your perspective on Brett Brown? Because there are a lot of people in this area, I mean, they can't stand Brett Brown. They think he's the worst coach. They think the guy doesn't know how to, be an NBA coach. Some people look at his over honesty and his desire to be clear with people in the press conferences and negative sometimes. What is your perspective of Brett Brown as an NBA coach?
I think he's definitely my top half. I think a lot of the criticisms are really unfair. At times I'd definitely say, he's around the top 10 or so coach in the league. And, I think when you look at his body of work from just taking them from, the absolute bottom, those 10-win seasons or whatever, to somehow maintain positivity and keep his sanity and stay with that group and the process and keep working on things was an incredible, testament to just sticking with it. And obviously he's got them to a much higher level than things were at, winning 50 games or 55 games or whatever it is every year. People criticize things like, his playbook, or he has, too small of a playbook or anything. But the people that really know in basketball know that, Brett Brown has a really in-depth playbook. It's just, truthfully, it's really hard to run a lot of things when you have a point guard who can't shoot, and I kind of just said, like I said, I don't think that's the huge crucial thing for Ben, but, then you have to at least be able to put other ball handlers on the floor that can make shots. And, I think Jimmy Butler was really important for them. And, if there's anything I'd maybe knock Brown for, it's probably, that relationship for whatever reason just did not work at all. And Jimmy seems to, really dislike Brett to this day. I think Jimmy was probably the alpha and, the best chance that Philly had of maybe getting this group over the hump. But overall, like I said, I think he has a really good approach to the game. I think he is honest and real with guys and demands accountability and makes them play defense. And, I think most nights they're one of the hardest playing teams in the NBA. So usually that's pretty high praise, that you can give for a coach. And I think he does a good job, reflecting the kind of gritty mentality that Philadelphia is looking for.
So reflecting on what you just said about the fact that, because of the way the offense is and because of, Ben and where his development is them part of the issue with the Sixers, the roster construction around their two stars, that maybe if they had better fitting pieces around Embiid and Simmons, that would actually not just elevate the team, but maximize Brett's offense?
Oh, for sure. I mean, again, like with Jimmy, for example, I said he didn't seem to like Brett very much, but, if the first day of free agency they came out and offered him a, full 5-year max or whatever, maybe it's a different story, and who knows exactly what the details were. But, I mean, I was shocked that they lost Jimmy after that, big move to get him. And, JJ Redick, I thought was just provided crucial floor space and fit really well, in that system as a shooter. And, you look around the roster now and Ben is obviously handling the ball a ton, which is a good thing. But then, behind him is Neto and Shake and, guys that are just, probably not rotation players on good teams. They can definitely use some better ball handlers that, more of how Eric Bledsoe plays in Milwaukee, handling the ball, running the offense a lot through him. It's hard, like I said, to really ask so much out of Simmons and Embiid. And, Tobias is a perfectly solid player, but, I think they're still missing some pieces. And, having another, real true point guard that can make shots and play pick and roll, with Embiid would be something that's pretty valuable in my opinion.
Brian, if we can flip it over to The Last Dance, obviously last night was the final 2 episodes. I want to get your thoughts of what were some of your takeaways, because, in some ways, I don't think there's a whole generation that didn't get to see Jordan play at all, or maybe they only got to see the very tip of the end of Jordan's era. And I think one of the things that gets overlooked is that, that era of basketball was different, but at the same time, it was an era of basketball that laid the foundation for today's game.
Yeah, at the end of the day, as much as people think, oh, the game's, Steph revolutionized the game or the game's totally different. I mean, it's really not. Basketball is still a very simple game at its core. 90% of the time, I'd say that the team that plays harder and executes better, and, there's no math equation that can quickly find you a way to win a basketball game. It's about the players, and it's about the cohesiveness, and you got to kind of witness all those things, and the Bulls certainly had their ups and downs and interesting moments and characters and events and things that almost pulled it apart at times. But yeah, I mean, obviously you saw that MJ is considered by many to be the greatest for a reason, and just was an absolute killer at getting to his spots and playing in the mid range and playing in the post, and had so many different solutions and ways to score. And, Pippen played his role perfectly and was a phenomenal player, obviously. And, Rodman, despite being, just the right amount of crazy, played his role unbelievably well. And yeah, I thought it was a great detailed look at kind of the inner workings, at least for that last season. And, you got to see that there were certainly chinks in the armor a lot of the time, but, obviously ended up being a pretty triumphant story in the end.
One thing that stood out to me also is that I think we got a better look, not just because of the documentary, but because of all the people who are talking about it now. The triangle offense in many ways was one of the forerunners of what we see in the league today, which is multiple ball handlers. They didn't have a pure point guard in Chicago. Scotty was like a point forward. Early on they had guys like Paxson, but Paxson wasn't really a point guard in terms of guys like Jason Kidd or Steve Nash. So, in many ways, do you feel like the Bulls offense was a precursor for a lot of the ways we see offenses run today, where it seems like every successful team in the league has to have a minimum of 2 ball handlers?
I think that's definitely a huge trend, in the game today. I think it's, like I mentioned, it's really hard to have a high-scoring, good offensive team without at least a couple guys that can play out of pick and roll with fun. I think what's funny about the triangle is it honestly was incredibly low volume in terms of pick and rolls. When you looked at even the Knicks when they brought it back a few years ago, the knock on the system really was that there's hardly any pick and rolls in the triangle, at least compared to some teams will run it 50, 60 times a game today. So I think honestly, the main thing I took away about the offense is just how beautiful it looked when it was executed to perfection. When it had guys that had really, obviously played together for a long time. When you have scores, killer scores like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant playing in those post up and elbows, which, not many guys, if you talk about anything being a lost art today, there's very few, superstars who really thrive in those areas. And I think it was simple, but it was hard to scout because it was all kind of reads and reacts and not based on so many play calls, but when it was really clicking and guys were moving the ball, it looked really good. And even when it wasn't clicking, again, when you have a guy like Michael Jordan, who's the greatest scorer of all time, he can make almost any offense look good because when things break down, he's still able to rise up and make his shots and just absolutely kill you that way.
Bryan, you can follow him on Twitter at Scout with Bryan Oringher here. Before we go, Bryan, give an opportunity to tell folks what they can get with the Patreon page because you have a lot of great content on there. I've enjoyed some of your video breakdowns on there. A lot of great stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Just if you type in, Scout with Bryan, like you said, with a Y, pretty much anywhere on YouTube, Scout with Bryan podcast, Scout with Bryan on Twitter. Find just a lot of behind the scenes X's and O's, deep dive film studies, and yeah, patreon.com/Scout with Bryan. You can get some bonus content, and really appreciate you having me.
Like all guests of Bryan appeared here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Appreciate the time, Bryan.
Thank you, Josh. Have a good one.